while they had a good network of getting their people to call, they just didn't give them all the information they needed.
Power comes from the fact that they've got a large number of people behind them who agree with their particular opinion.
I have single contacts that affect me every day.
You can't turn it on and turn it off. You have to work at it.
Because a grassroots effort really means that a lot of people are contacting you.
Just you have to know when to work out a compromise, when to cut the deal.
Hi, I'm John Call, and I've been working around state government for 30 years. I've worked as a top aide to the Senate Majority Leader and as a lobbyist in both the public and private sectors. Today I'm president of Capital Gains Incorporated, a business engaged in developing legislative and public relations strategies and in lobbying. I have represented a broad range of clients, including county government, telecommunications, public education, professional sports, and auto manufacturing, to mention some. From all this experience, I know there are two simple ways you can influence the course of legislation. One is to hire a lobbyist. That's how I make my living, and that's what many of the bigger organizations and businesses do. The other is to become a citizen lobbyist. If you do it right, this is the most effective method of all. That's what this video is all about, teaching you to become an effective citizen lobbyist.
Some of my colleagues say that they would rather hear from what we would say an ordinary citizen than any of those paid lobbyists on any issue, that they trust the citizens' input.
I got the idea of making this video from watching hundreds of grassroots efforts over the years. I've seen some good ones, but I've also seen a lot of missteps and missed opportunities. Also, as I thought more and more about this subject, I wondered what impact technology, which has had such a profound effect on our daily lives, has had on the operation of the legislature.
I would say that even in the last 7 to 8 years, communication is more instantaneous, it's more accessible. Whether that's cable TV that literally brings what we're doing out into the homes, or email has made communication more instantaneous.
Over the years, I've given lots of people and groups advice on how they can positively influence the legislative process. But last year, as I thought about all the changes that have occurred during my professional career, I began to worry that my own words might have taken on the hollow ring of conventional wisdom. I decided it was time to do a reality check with the only true experts in the field, the people who hold the election certificates, the very people we wish to influence. And that's what I did. During a 3-month period, I interviewed 25 legislators of every type. I talked to leaders and former leaders, to liberals and conservatives, to men and women, urban and rural members of the Minnesota legislature. I asked them a series of questions designed to find out what works and doesn't work when it comes to grassroots communication. What I learned will definitely be useful to those of you who wish to have some control over your own destiny. What I hope to do in this presentation is to give you the blueprint of a successful grassroots campaign based on advice from the ultimate source, the legislators you wish to influence. The first thing I learned is that there are a number of groups which have run successful campaigns in recent years. But interestingly, no single effort stands out above all others. When I asked legislators to name the most effective grassroots campaign they had witnessed during their time in the legislature, the answers were all over the place, with one exception.
The most effective one involved the NSP Prairie Island issue.
It was the election of Governor Ventura.
Frankly, the Artsy done a very good job.
And the issue had to do with controlled business and real estate companies having title companies and mortgage companies.
Housing.
Optometrists and
Hunting groups, the churches.
Is the Caledonia School.
Well, I would say Wellstone's first campaign for U.S. Senate was probably one of the most effective campaigns I've ever seen.
Everyone seems to have a favorite, which may in part be due to the specialization of the legislature. But no single group stands out, other than the one exception I mentioned before, the almost completely spontaneous anti-stadium earthquake of 1997.
The opposition that grew around the Twin Stadium proposal.
The anti-stadium lobby.
It's the anti-stadium movement.
And I literally saw the phone system and the fax system and all communications shut down in St. Paul because of the calls that came in that day from concerned and yes, even angry citizens thinking that their tax dollars were going to be used to build a ballpark.
The aftershocks of '97 were still felt during the Twins' far more successful effort in 2001 when the stadium bill made it out of committee and to the floor in both bodies. What we're going to do is not only look at what we should do, but also at what we should not do. You'll hear from legislators about what works and why it works. We will, with the help of these experts, distill the common elements of success, and we will also isolate the mistakes that are so often made, and this will help you to avoid them. Maybe you've been at this sort of thing for a long time and you're already doing a pretty good job. This video should help you do it better. If you're new to the process, I hope to leave you with a solid plan for success. During these interviews, I also asked legislators to comment on the least effective grassroots communications they had witnessed. The answers were instructive.
We've seen groups come and go, and they've lost out because of their style or their pressure tactics.
The least effective ones are the ones that are really combative in nature, that really don't necessarily try to seek a middle ground.
The one that really comes to mind with me is the MCCL, Minnesota Citizens Concerned for Life, and the problem there from my perspective, and of course I'm biased because they did come after me once and I'm pro-life, is they go after their friends.
The effort to pass the concealed and carry legislation.
Petition signings regarding not proceeding with welfare reform.
Unicameral legislation.
You know, it's hard to say what was least effective because I probably don't even remember them.
Failures are hard to remember.
I can't think of anything.
Well, there's been a lot of them that are not very effective. Those that aren't very effective, you don't hear about them because they don't get anywhere, obviously.
Not surprisingly, it's hard to remember the efforts that failed to materialize. To help us diagnose the problems associated with failed efforts, I asked legislators, what is the most common failing of organized grassroots campaigns? Here is what they said.
I think they're not very organized.
Simply put, it's the lack of good follow-through.
If you don't have accurate data, you can be discredited immediately.
People don't understand how the process works. They think that they have to go to every legislator, give all of them just reams of material about their issue.
If you kind of announce publicly back home in the legislator's district that you're organizing a grassroots effort, my advice would be to be sure you do that. And there's nothing worse than the expectation that things are going to happen and there's nothing in the mailbox.
These answers help us to understand what's wrong, but they don't tell us enough about what we can do to be more effective. My interviews included many questions designed to get at what does work, and from the many hours of tape I used in completing the survey, I fashioned the 7 pillars of effective grassroots communication. Since we don't have much time, let's get started. There's so much skepticism out there, and yet as I interviewed legislators, what I heard over and over again is that individuals can and do make a difference.
A bill that I carried involving warning labels on prescription drugs, where clearly one person made a difference.
I had a visit with one of Northwest Airlines' mechanics, longtime strong union advocate who was a constituent of mine, not anybody that I could recall ever was involved in politics or campaigns or anything like that. But that person told me in their own words how they saw the package and how they saw the new chairman of the airlines at that time and how they saw the financial condition of the airline from their perspective as a mechanic. And they were very persuasive.
In Minnesota, one person makes a difference. That is one advantage of having a relatively large legislature is that legislators are more accessible.
Every one of the contacts I receive from individuals, from friends, from neighbors, affects me.
So the system does work, but is only as good as the people who get involved and the information they provide. When I got involved in politics many, many years ago, it was because I believed I could make a difference. My experience during a lifetime of involvement at every level of politics tells me that's still true. But you have to learn how the system works and how you can work the system. So suspend your disbelief and get involved. A great segue into pillar number 2.
Well, I think the most common failing of grassroots efforts is not to put any seed, so there's no grass.
If one person can make a difference at the legislature, imagine what 2 or many more can do. The more people involved in contacting the legislature, the better your chance of success. Regional support is better than local, and statewide better than regional. The important thing is to get as many people as you can working together around the same clear message. Good organization is vital to success and requires strong leadership, careful planning, hard work, and good internal communication. You've got to start early. If your issue is controversial or complex, it may take a year or longer to lay the proper foundation. I asked legislators when they would begin a grassroots campaign and how they would pace it.
Timing in politics is everything.
Well, you'd have to begin long before the legislative session, I think.
Well, if you're targeting a specific legislative session, I would begin as soon as the prior session ended.
You are getting involved at a time when legislators are still forming their opinion on an issue.
Then when you come back to them during the legislative session, they already have been introduced to both you and the issue, and you don't have to start from square one.
They need information. They need to be educated about it, and that's something that isn't necessarily going to happen in a 5-minute phone call the night before they're supposed to vote on it.
If it was an ideal situation, I'd start it 2 years before, and I would be identifying my supporters and then urging them to get involved in a candidate's campaign.
If I were to start a grassroots campaign, I'd already think I was late. You never can start it soon enough.
The message is clear. Start early. In addition to recruiting individual supporters, another way to magnify your impact is to form coalitions with other groups or organizations. When a school district, for example, gets a Chamber of Commerce to support a funding bill, it's a big deal.
If you can broaden your base by bringing in other constituency groups that see the need for the policy changes that you're advancing, the better, and that obviously sometimes takes time.
Spend time developing a strong case for the legislative initiative you're advancing or the proposal you oppose. Pull together information that supports your position. It's important as you fashion your case that you understand the psychology and the reasoning of the opposition. Understanding the opposition's point of view will help you make a stronger case for your own cause.
And I think if you're going to make persuasive arguments against a particular position, it's important to know what the persuasive arguments are in favor, so that as you do your arguments, as you do your analysis, you can bring those points up and refute those points.
Your organization will need good internal communication. Develop a mechanism for keeping your membership informed about your issue and about unfolding developments as well.
The education lobbies in general and teachers in particular have been very effective at that in terms of at least communicating with their own members. Very early on, 15, 16, 18 years ago, they were already using fairly sophisticated techniques around hotlines and things.
You could develop a newsletter or a list of people who receive regular email updates. A phone tree is another possibility. And finally, as Senate Majority Leader Moe suggests, plant lots of seeds, all over the state if possible. No seeds, no grassroots. In this business, there's a hierarchy of effectiveness. The most effective efforts are the most personal. More personal means a higher level of organization and a greater commitment of time. You can't successfully discharge your civic responsibility or influence the course of a bill, for that matter, with an impersonal email whipped out in 20 seconds. Technology has increased the speed and convenience of communication, but it has also depersonalized the contact elected officials have with their constituents. The contacts nowadays are becoming more and more fleeting and remote. Often it comes like junk mail addressed to occupant.
When you get a pile of emails, and sometimes you get them, several hundred on a given issue, and they're addressed to every single legislator, it's very difficult to filter through all of that to determine exactly who you're hearing from in terms of your constituencies versus someone who may be writing you from any number of places in the state.
What I'm about to say is not true for every elected official, but it's true for the majority. Most politicians like to meet constituents in person. They want to understand what you're thinking and why. They also want you to understand their positions and the pressure they're under. In most cases, the best method of contact is a personal visit, either in the district or in their capital office.
I do like to hear from my constituents. So when you want to get something done, as far as I'm concerned, make sure that I have constituents who are also interested in it. Don't just send me a professional lobbyist.
These personal visits are the best way to develop an ongoing relationship, which is the most important ingredient for success.
I know how easily influenced I am by people that'll take the time from my district, spend some time with me, educating me on the issue, and continuing to stay in touch with me and advocate for their position.
This may sound a bit like Emily Post, but you should always follow up such visits with handwritten thank you notes. Not many people do this, but it's worth your time to do so. Issues don't just go away. If you're on a first-name basis with your local legislator, your phone slips go to the top of the callback list when something you care about gets hot.
To me, the most effective grassroots lobbying effort is built on top of a relationship that you already have with that elected official, and includes follow-through on the back end that continues to that dialogue and that relationship for the future, because if your issue today is X and you win or lose, it doesn't matter. By next year it's going to be Y, and you're going to need to move ahead. And
a close second is a thoughtful letter that doesn't read like every other letter written on the same subject. Form letters and postcards don't count for much. Legislators know how much time and thought go into form letters and postcards, and they're not impressed.
The letters that come to you that sound as though they've all been memorized off the same record, you know, they all use similar language, the thoughts are similar, they're in the same sequence. You start to discount those.
It's important to be concise, and it's important to let legislators know why you feel strongly about an issue. They get so much information thrown at them every day. It's like trying to get a drink of water from a fire hydrant.
There are some real rules on how to write an effective letter, whether it's pen and pencil or pen and paper, or whether it's by email. And that is, you put your name, you put your address, and you put your telephone number on it. You don't just sign it and let it go. You have to have a way for legislators to know how to get back in touch with you. And it really is a courtesy to them to let them know whether you're a constituent or not.
The third best way to contact your legislator is by phone. It's best to start with their office staff at the Capitol. If that doesn't work, a call to their home is acceptable to most legislators, providing you're a constituent and you're mindful of the time of day or holidays. I put emails down as the fourth best way to communicate in most situations. I'm not saying you shouldn't use email, but I am saying if you're going to send an email, it's important to make the email look and read like a letter. Start out with some kind of salutation. Act as if you're writing a letter and use the same rules of grammar and etiquette. Legislators express some frustration about email.
My friends, I'm not exaggerating. I have a stack of emails on a counter in my office that is that high on one issue. One issue. And half of them, you don't know who they're from. I mean, there's no address, no phone number, no nothing.
I receive somewhere during session 200 to 400 emails a day, so it really takes a lot of fishing to wade through all of the emails and find those that are from real life constituents.
I want to underscore this point. If you live in the district, make sure the legislator knows this important fact as early as possible in the email. Always give them your name, address, and phone number in case they have questions.
When it's in the heat of the battle, you may get 50, 100 emails a day, and there's no way you can respond to all of them. One of the things that happens is my legislative assistant will go through and just start looking at them and deleting those that are not from my district.
When sending email, consider context. If you're a teacher or professor at one of our great institutions, it's not very effective to use state-owned computers and networks to lobby legislators for more money for your cause. To them, it looks like public employees asking for more money for themselves while on the job using equipment provided by taxpayers. The telltale email moniker tells all with its EDU signature. At the bottom of the hierarchy of effectiveness are postcards and petitions. They're pretty ineffective, but don't take my word for it.
First of all, I'm not a strong believer in petitions, in signing petitions. I think that Signing petitions takes little thought. Sometimes you put little thought before people who present a petition to you to sign. In fact, ironically, I will tell you, in I think it was 84, I signed, maybe 86, I signed a petition for my opponent to run against me in the campaign.
The general rule is that little effort on the part of the sender equates to little consideration on the part of the receiver.
The more personal the communication can be, the better. That's a generalization, but I think true. And so if you rank things based on email at the lower end of the spectrum up through more conventional mail, telephone calls, and then one-to-one communication, I'd say that the priorities kind of go up in that way. There's just nothing more influential with most legislators than getting advice or input about an issue from someone they know and trust.
There's an old saying, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. This applies to your message as well. Avoid going nowhere by making sure you know your message before you make an appointment or write or call. Before the meeting, ask yourself this question: what are my goals for this meeting? Stress 3 or 4 big points, not 15 little ones. If you're talking to a legislator about a specific bill, be sure you know the author and the bill number. Watch the time. Elected officials have busy schedules. If you disrupt their schedule by talking too long, you may find that you sold your idea at the beginning of the meeting and bought it back at the end. The best way to communicate a concept is with a story or an image. People remember images. Senator Moe provided an example of the value of a strong image when he talked about planting lots of seeds. An example of a strong visual image is provided here by Speaker Swigum. When I asked him about the chance of the legislature agreeing on a redistricting bill, this is what he said.
I probably have a better chance of making this basket from 3/4 court than we do of Senate and House members getting together on a redistricting bill. Awesome. There's always hope for the future.
It's important to tell the truth. Disarming candor will get you a lot further than obfuscation.
And I tell you, that is the worst thing anybody can ever do to a legislator, is try to mislead them or lie to them, because we remember.
If you use a bad fact, or if you use a bad fact intentionally, forget coming back, quite frankly. And it doesn't even matter if you're a constituent. There's nothing worse than being misled.
And if you don't know the answer, admit it and volunteer to get the answer. You may ask for their support, but don't demand a commitment or try to tell them what they should do.
But what we don't appreciate is when someone tells us we have to do something. That's always frustrating to us, and it's a little bit easier to get our attention by giving us the facts, figures, and talking about policy rather than using a strong arm.
Be positive. Give legislators positive reasons for the need for a law change or a funding initiative. Don't complain that you deserve more funding because someone else is getting more. Legislators and their staff can poke holes in such comparisons in a minute. And worse yet, the "he's getting more money than I" sounds awfully whiny. No one likes to listen to whiners. I once remember a staff person telling a whining lobbyist to take his concerns about his relative treatment to the non-existent Fairness Committee. Don't make threats of any kind. I asked legislators to comment on the effectiveness of the aggressive, in-your-face tactics of some lobby groups.
Is to threaten them and say, well, I'm not going to support you and none of my friends will either unless you go along with what I want. We have to satisfy the needs of thousands of people in our districts. And threatening simply does not do a lot of good. All of these people have different opinions on issues. And somehow or other, we have to use our own judgment, taking into consideration what our constituents believe and the information that we have in front of us about it.
If you get mad at a legislator, you've lost the case, period.
Certainly there's going to be strong feelings one way or the other, but I think the key to all of this is civility.
Be prepared to compromise. In the end, make sure you know what constitutes a victory for your cause under the circumstances. Too often, newcomers to the process don't understand the role compromise plays in resolving differences of opinion.
I think the most common failing in grassroots efforts is the expectation that they're going to get everything that they want. They're not used to compromise. They have a single issue. They think it's the only issue in the world, and they're disappointed if they don't get everything that they want.
A good government is a bundle of compromises. I don't get my way. When I put a bill in, when Chuck puts a bill in, it doesn't come out the same way. And you got to compromise, and you got to take small steps at times.
In all this, it's also important not to overplay your hand. So work your issue hard, but don't harass legislators.
Even though I need 37 exposures to a new idea, I might need it from 37 different people and not 37 times from one person. And so you can get to the point that the legislature, you get people tired by going too far, too vehemently, too often.
And quite honestly, after 23 years, when the finger comes up in your face to say, I'll get you in the next election, I'm too old for that. I got too many whiskers and too many political barnacles on my body to be threatened anymore, and I just dislike it very, very, very much.
Finally, if you're working on a controversial or high-stake issue, you'll need to coordinate your ground game with an aerial attack. By that I mean, one effective way to develop legislative support is to generate public support by communicating through the media.
If it's going to call for a major media effort, which would require, again, local letters to the editor, local news accounts, and then building that up, that also is a timely and time-consuming process.
You don't need an expensive ad agency to accomplish this. Much can be done with press releases, letters to the editor, op-ed pieces, and special events. That's a whole different subject, but one you'll need to consider if you want to be successful with the more complex issues. We've discussed the importance of getting organized early. Most groups make the serious mistake of waiting for the legislature to meet before they begin talking about their issues. By that time, legislators are so busy that getting their attention for 5 minutes is like trying to instruct a jury while at Disneyland. The first contacts regarding a particular issue should start well before the legislature convenes.
Start before the legislative session begins. Start before people have made decisions, before they have entrenched decisions.
Speaking of timing, there are constitutional deadlines that limit the number of days the legislature can meet in any given year. It is vital to understand these deadlines if you intend to pace your campaign to the cadences of the process. There are deadlines for bill introductions, for policy and spending committees, for floor action, and for action by the governor. The best resource for this kind of information is the legislative manual, which is available at no cost from either the Secretary of the Senate or the Chief Clerk's office. This manual also contains biographical information, committee assignments, as well as phone numbers and addresses.
As most people will come to realize, it's a very accessible process. Both the Senate and the House have weekly newsletters. For the House, it's a session weekly. For the Senate briefly. They come out every Friday, and they inform citizens as to upcoming committee hearings. More importantly, they also highlight the action that took place the previous week. Now, the slight danger in just going by the committee schedule is that these are sent to the printer on Thursday. There are changes, and that's why it's very important to have our website address. As soon as changes are made, they are indicated on the screen.
Sustaining your effort is important. Legislators must contend with many forces and with many demands on their attention. Don't let your cause fall through the cracks for lack of follow-through.
I think sustainability. Some of the successful grassroots efforts, I think of the effort to reform our corporate subsidy laws, took 2 or 3 or 4 years of continued effort in building that grassroots support before they became successful.
There is no clear rule as to when you should launch your campaign. Just remember that legislators need time to consider your point of view. At the very least, you should begin your effort at least 2 or 3 months before the session starts. If the issue is complex or controversial, you'll need much more lead time. Early we talked about meeting with the staff. It would be easy for an outsider to underestimate the important role played by staff. Every legislator has staff. If you're a speaker or the Senate Majority Leader, you might have a half a dozen assigned. If you're a freshman, you'll probably share the time of an aide.
Our staff plays a pretty important role. You know, when you're representing 35, almost 40,000 people in a district as we do, it's impossible to be in touch, personally in touch with those folks. You know, you try to answer the phone, try to meet with folks, but the volume can get pretty hard, pretty big. And so it's usually your staff that's going to be the first person and the most consistent person in touch with talking to your constituents.
Don't ignore any of them. They are usually quite knowledgeable and very adept at helping citizens, especially citizens who are polite and respectful of their role. Start with the secretary to the individual member. These are the people who determine which mail is read and which calls are returned. Frequently, they fill in for a legislator who has a scheduling conflict.
The staff is the one that's going to look at the pros and the cons and then relay the information to the senator. We rely on that information, and they have the time to usually do the good research and find out if that issue is credible or the people who are bringing the issue forward are credible.
Staff usually keep the schedule and therefore control access. It's not a bad idea to send them a thank you note if they are helpful to you. Who we elect really matters, and the best way to evaluate the performance of your elected officials is to know them and follow their actions. This can be accomplished in a number of ways, including attendance at town hall meetings, inviting legislators to visit your organization, going to fundraisers, meetings in a local coffee shop, and working on a campaign. Let me underscore that last point. Get involved in campaigns. The issues that end up driving campaigns also end up driving legislative agendas. Make sure your issue is a campaign issue.
The agenda of the campaigns is almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. It becomes then the agenda for the legislative session.
If you have a representative or a senator who works hard for the district and cares about issues that are important to you, then it's in your best interest to get them reelected.
It does come down to who you trust and who you know. And it really helps if people are involved in a campaign, because that's where a relationship was built, and then you obviously know if you're going to trust that person when they come to you with an issue that they support.
Make sure they get reelected by donating money to their campaign or by campaigning for them. If someone works hard for you, you should be there for them when they face the voters. And remember what Abraham Lincoln said. If we turn our back to the fire during an election and get scorched in the rear, we'll find we have to sit on the blister. Many of us feel we are nursing the blisters of neglect right now. Let's summarize. First, believe you can make a difference and start doing so.
If you use one clip from me, I'd like you to use this one to let every citizen know, every person there, that they are their own best lobbyists.
Second, start early and get organized to magnify your impact.
Start as early as you can to get your folks organized, but also to make contact with legislators before the legislative session so that they can meet you and have some understanding before the legislature starts of what your issue is.
Third, make it personal and make it positive.
To make it very personal, I remember my mother telling me that she expected me to support the living will legislation. Now when your mother tells you that she wants you to support the living will legislation, that's going to have an influence on you.
Fourth, tell your story well, get your facts right.
The communication effort has to convey information to the legislator that legislator can use.
Fifth, timing is important for every step of your operation.
If you are prepared, you know what your message is, you know how you want to disseminate it, and then you're ready when the time is there. So you need the hard work of preparation, the hard work of knowing what the message is, and being astute enough to know when best to deliver the message.
Sixth, get to know the staff of the legislature and work with them as well.
Staff are the most important piece of the work we do here because they connect us to our constituents. And so I think that we should honor staff and expect them to honor our constituents as well and be responsive.
Seventh, get involved and make a difference. You'll accomplish great things and have fun doing it.
You know, everyday people or grassroots efforts have their advantage over lobbyists is you're the public that we're supposed to serve. We're not there to serve lobbyists or any of that. We're there to serve the actual day-to-day people, and that's what grassroots efforts are all about.
If you would like additional copies of this tape or the workbook that accompanies it, please call, write, or email Capital Gains. If you are interested in advice or help in organizing an effective grassroots campaign, I would be happy to meet with you or your organization. Thank you very much.